Hi, Dan. I'm so excited
Hi.
to talk to you.
Oh, cool. Thanks.
So, in this episode, we see how passionate you are about portraiture.
Hmm.
As a viewer, it's refreshing to see the portrait of your life. When National Geographic approached you about this project, why was it important to include the perspectives from your son Dylan and your wife Catherine? And what made you want to do this project?
We were initially contacted about a year prior to filming as kind of, I think, an exploratory sort of interview process to help them to see, if there was a film there, what the narrative could be, what the story was. And so we talked to them on several occasions and then ultimately met up with Pagan Harleman and Gene Gallerano, producer and director, in New York and kind of solidified the kind of deal. Um, I was interested in it for a number of reasons. I think as an artist, um, to a degree, legacy is important, and I felt like it would be a good opportunity to create a legacy project. I mean, I think the my true legacy is my body of work, which is a 40-year body of work at this point. Um, but there was something about the idea of doing it as a film that was intriguing to me because I'm very interested in film. And I think the other aspect was that I felt a great sense of trust and connectivity to Gene and Pagan, and it really felt like it could be something special. Now, with regards to including Dylan and Kath, that kind of evolved. That evolved. In fact, when they said they wanted to interview Dylan and Kath, I was a little bit surprised at the time. It was early in on the shooting, and they came down to Austin to do some interviews. They came down a few times to do interviews, and said, "Oh yeah, we're interviewing Kath as well." And I think it caught her a little bit off guard as well. I don't think she was had really signed up for that. But I'm really grateful to have had her perspective in the documentary. It seems like it shifted gears a little bit when she and Dylan got involved, because it became much more about a family, like a family story, which
Mhm.
I'm really happy about because now I have a legacy object that has, the people I'm closest to in it as well as myself, and they play an integral role in my life and vice versa. So I think that probably was something that I'm really grateful for.
Right? So, as a kid, you say your pursuits were outside your parents' understanding. Can you
Mhm.
talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think sort of what I would be. I was very mindful when I was a kid of influences that I was having and influences that weren't necessarily like a part of the vernacular of the family. I subscribed to different science fiction magazines, and I was at the library constantly, and my interests started to evolve that were outside of the scope of interest that, my dad was a welder, my mom was like a homemaker, later on a school bus driver. Um, and so I don't think on some level they like knew what to make of me to a degree.
Mhm.
I was always making little 8 millimeter movies with my friends, mostly like army movies, and I was building miniatures and blowing them up and burning little model tanks and things like that. And while I do feel like my parents were really good at always fostering my interests, which I'm really grateful for, like there was never a time that they would shut down, a trip to the library or, uh, any kind of opportunity taking me to air shows or things like that that I felt like were kind of nurturing my soul to a degree at that point. But I think that it was not only my parents, it was also like the counselor at my school didn't really know how to help me, when I asked for advice about a career in photography or a career in film. And I grew up in a really rural area outside of a small town, and it was just not a part of what people did there then at that time, in the 70s.
Right. That's interesting. Fast forwarding a little bit to after college, you wanted to break into magazines and you moved to New York City without a job. Were you that confident in your skills, or were you just young and dumb and willing to take a chance, or
I
both?
think it's both. I think, New York City to me, Levon Helm said something about New York City. He said, New York City is an adult portion. And I really feel like that sums it up. It's not a place to be if you're broke at all. I
Mm,
thought a lot about Orwell's book Down and Out in Paris and London when I was in New York because he was like basically just surviving off of like bread crust that he would get from the back door of restaurants. They'd befriend the people in the restaurants and they'd clean the plates and give them the food off the plates and stuff. It was never that bad for me. But I take a great deal of pride in the fact that I moved out when I was 18 and I never once borrowed money from anybody from that point on. Like I was completely self-contained and I'm very proud of that because, moving to New York without really knowing anybody, uh, I was very confident in my skills and probably a little overconfident, to be honest, when I think about it now. Um, you know, when you're in over your head, sometimes you don't know you're in over your head,
right.
and it just all worked. I've used this analogy before, but I felt like when I went to New York, the one thing I did know is that if everything completely fell apart, I could crash on my parents' couch.
Mm,
Like there was a parachute for me, and they're still with us after all these years.
oh,
And
nice.
so I felt very much so like, there's a parachute for me. And I had friends that didn't have that in New York, and I could see that it could have been very scary, but that was one of the greatest times of my life living in the city. I really enjoyed it.
Good. Good. The National Geographic photo editor, Todd James, said that you add quote unquote Dan drama to your photos.
hmm
When you hear that, what does it mean to you?
I think I like to use the term epic. I like to sort of like see what potential the subject has and then try to paint it in its best light or kind of, even like photographing the space shuttle. I use this term sexy angle. Like if I've anthropomorphized the shuttle and say like this is the sexiest angle for the shuttle, like I know the shuttle, I know how to photograph it, I know the sweet spot for the camera. It's almost like someone saying like this is my good side, this is my bad side.
Yeah,
But I try to exploit that always, and I try to find kind of the epic nature in everything I shoot. And it's really interesting shooting, especially shooting machines, which I've done a lot of, trying to find sort of like that human quality uh to them, because they are ultimately like, they're alive. I mean, everything's alive. If you think about it on molecular level, like even a rock is like in motion on an atomic level. So I do like the idea of trying to find that sort of drama or find that inspiration in whatever I photograph.
great. So when you get to Dhaka and Ratan is showing you the workshops of the workers, your excitement and your curiosity are really palpable. Tell
hmm
me about how it feels to be on location.
Yeah, I love shooting on location. The thing about locations is you can think about what it's going to be all day long, but until you get there and start to experience it, it reveals itself, and sometimes slowly and sometimes more quickly. New environments, oftentimes there's a heightened awareness of them because it's new. And as time passes, things can slip into sort of like mundanity, I think. Um, Showing up at Dhaka in the yards there was almost a little bit overwhelming. And I really tried to like exploit that newfound kind of excitement that I was feeling when we got there and hoping it sort of like didn't go away. We were there for a couple weeks shooting, and and it was constantly revealing itself, and it was constantly evolving, and dealing with the workers was incredible. They were all so gentle and grateful. And we made a point to we found a lab, and we made a point to print every single portrait I shot. And then I went on the last day. I didn't even take a camera actually on the last day. I went on the last day just to hand out photos to all the workers, and I could see how touched they were to have that object. We made prints, and that was a really beautiful thing. But I'd say location photography in general is kind of wonderful. You go into it with this idea, and usually the idea is off, but it's good to go in with a plan, and then having, oftentimes to roll with or pivot to kind of a plan B is the nature of shooting on location. But yeah, the DACA location was just, you couldn't ask for a better location. It was just so stimulating, and so kind of, just, it was just amazing location.
It was really beautiful. You took awesome photos. So I am not super familiar with the process of photography. I take a good photo every now and then, but I'm not sure people understand how much time and effort goes into taking a great photo. Can you take me through your process from conception to execution? And I know there's more than that, but I like whatever you want to talk about, I'm interested in hearing.
Yeah, I think if we're making a photo, like we're building a photo, like in a studio where we have a set and we have styling and we have hair and makeup and we have talent on set, um, it's easier to think through that process for me because I'm in control of all the aspects of it, from the color of the set, the color of the walls, the color of the background, the color of the clothing. All those things are in my control. And so I look at that, kind of the analogy would be like I'm building a photograph. We know, like, I have an idea, it's preconceived. Usually it's drawn out on paper and storyboarded. So everybody, all the different departments know like what the goal is of the day. And then I'll start with that, and then sometimes it morphs into something else. And I always allow for that because I feel like those are uh, oftentimes kind of make better photographs when the situation evolves into another kind of picture, and for the better, hopefully. Um, on location, it's about seeing the potential of the location and then exploiting that. So if I'm documenting something that's happening, that's going on, that's moving fluidly, you know, uh, really having kind of foresight about the thing and understand, like, for example, like a rocket launch, having a deep understanding of how that works, of where the rocket goes, of how long the engines burn before the main engine start takes place, like all these factors, right? So understanding them very, very well prior to will allow me to not fail when the event takes place. And so I think, really researching, all like I remember watching first shuttle launch I shot was in the 90s, and watching videos of the way the thing kind of like functions. So they really had an understanding of like, okay, the main engines fire 8.3 seconds before the solid rocket boosters fire, and as it gets up to about 2,000 or 3,000 feet, and then it starts to roll over on its back and head down range. Like all of those things are important when you're shooting it because you have to know like where to place the cameras, what to expect, what's going to happen. So really preparation, I think, is everything. But to get back to like the idea of shooting on location, that we were speaking about, a lot of those variables don't present themselves to me, because I don't have a comprehensive understanding of like where the day's going to go, what we're going to encounter. And I think that's where experience comes in. My mentor, John Gray, said to me at one point, the difference between a professional and an amateur photographer is that the professional photographer, it's compulsory for him to bring back an image for professional, and for the amateur, it's not compulsory. So we really need to understand our subject and understand the medium in order to guarantee And sometimes we like will lapse into formula, like we'll lapse into something we know, because like worst case scenario on a portrait, I can always do a tight headshot. Like I
Right.
know that. And if I start out not wanting that, but things are kind of going south and I'm not able to make like the kind of most compelling image I want to, I know I can like pivot to that. So, just knowing your own limitations and knowing the limitations of the medium, which I feel like is one of the most important piece. But I think the other really important piece is understanding the way we think about our work and the way we think about photography. If we understand that and have that dialogue with ourselves, um, that's very helpful because we can sort of always like go to that and go to that dialogue and kind of like have that dialogue with ourselves, which is very helpful.